today we'll hopefully get most of the sanding done on this, and then we should have all our insides done, and we'll start on the outside. Okay, so remember from before we had miscellaneous little dings and dents here and there. So we took care of those areas first and used a little filler on them. Now we'll go ahead and sand those down nice and even. Then I'll do a thin skin coat over the entire thing and get it even more even. In all of the spots that I have filler covering up my holes, I'm going to want to drill those holes out with a little bit of kind of a sandpaper drill here, see? And you can get these things at Harbor Freight and Home Depot and such. But if you don't drill these holes out every time, you're going to lose them and forget where they are. So I'm sure I've said this many times, but we'll just give you a quick recap of what we got going on here. Now, when I am doing a large piece like this, I don't want primer, Bondo, metal, primer, Bondo, metal. I don't want a zebra effect. I want a nice, even sheet of color on this when I'm done. So if I was to just lay a thin filler coat on here, and this just having a few dings here or there, and I laid that thin filler coat on, and then it's still a little bit low like this, then I'm going to have to put on another skim coat right here. So then I'm going to have primer, Bondo, Bondo on top of Bondo, which I really don't like. It happens sometimes, but you want to try to have the least amount of that as possible, because if you have little patches of repairs here on top of this and that and scattered about, that can come back later and haunt you. But if you just have a nice sheet of even color across here, then it won't. Now, even if this was brand new from the factory, you still might want to do a skim coat, because it won't be straight. Anywhere there's a fold in the metal, like right here, it's got a little bit of a divot that you can kind of see. These lines here generally won't be totally straight. Right here we'll divot in just a little bit because of all the contour bending that has to go on there. And right around here, see, like right in, for instance, right in here, because of the stamping of this causes a depression in the metal right here. You can see you have a high spot here, and you can see you have a high spot here because you're hitting metal. So that means all of this is valley. Now, this doesn't look that bad, you know. If we're doing a quickie job or whatever, we could just shoot fat coat primer on this and basically done with it if we're doing a nice, decent daily driver. But we're painting this black. So what we would do is that if you were to shoot this area with primer and it did not fill it up, then you'd be going, well, geez, now am I going to shoot more primer on it, or now am I going to put Bondo on it, therefore giving me the Bondo primer effect. So we take care of all of our dings and everything, and we get the basics of this all nice and even, so that when we lay that skim coat on, it goes on very even, and we don't have any low spots that we have to take care of after the fact. Also, if you have low spots like this and it has kind of a harsh looking edge on it like this, or right here, you can see how that looks kind of harsh right there. Right here, this has got a hard line right here. We want to get a little bit of sandpaper and sand that away, because if I was to lay a thin layer skin coat over this and then it got sanded down, and this might phantom up later. So we sand anything like that out a little bit and get rid of all of the harsh edges. Now when it lays down, we don't have to worry about it phantoming up later. So now I will just clean this, do a little bit more sanding on it and clean it off, and then I'll go ahead and lay a thin skim coat of filler over the entire piece of metal. And again, I know that sounds a little bit radical and crazy and shit, but think of it this way. I can either shoot a lot of primer on this, or I can have a little thin skin coat of Bondo. Some primers go up to $100 a gallon. We're using some $60 a gallon. The Bondo is only $45 a gallon, so at least you have a savings there. And you can get Bondos all the way down to $11. Not as good as this. And also, I should probably keep in mind, is that we're using really high-grade filler on this. I'm using the Evercoat Extreme filler, and this is really nice filler. And I can just use 80 grit scratches on this to have that Bondo attach. Bondo does not adhere chemically, it adheres physically, so you have to have some scratches in there for it to hold on to. If you're using cheaper Bondo, or if you've got a really deep dent, then you've got to use 36 grit scratches in there, and I don't like having 36 grit scratches in stuff if I can get away with it, because they can phantom up on you in the future. So if you don't put any 36 grit scratches in there, you don't have to worry about taking them out. Okay. 80 grit scratches in for the filler to hold on to. And what I like to do is get all of the scratches going the same way because it helps the filler lay down nice and easy. If I have scratches going this way and I try to lay the filler down, sometimes it'll curl over the wrinkles there and give me kind of a turbulence and air bubbles and stuff. But if I have all the Bondo lines going like this and I put the filler in, then it just goes straight into the line, less trouble. The Bondo is not going to stick to dust, so you have to blow it off. Then you have to run either wax and grease remover over it or post sand, what have you. But you got to make sure that all of your scratches are nice and clean for your filler to hook onto. Laying filler over this entire thing, mixing it up and spreading it down, it's tough to do and keep it all wet at the same time, so you know it's best to employ two people, one to lay it down and one to mix it. This way when you run out here, you'll immediately have wet filler to put on top and you can just keep on going. Now if you don't have two people, then what you're going to need to do is just lay the filler down and then wiggle it, mix it up real quick and lay it down. But if it's too much, then just go ahead and wait till it dries, sand it down with some 80 grit, and feather it in, and then lay down the next patch and stuff like that. You can also do just a section like this, and then just do a section like this. But it's really best to do the whole mass at once in order to get the straight as possible. First I'll push it down with some force and make sure that I'm in there. And then I can come back with a nice smooth shaping. Okay, so you can see on this bit that it really looks pretty good. But now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll do a light block sand on it, and that'll show our high and low spots. So I'll generally do this with 150, or maybe I'll use some old 80 grit that was laying around. And you can see that this one's a little bit better than the other one. There are some spots here that are still low. Now these aren't so low that using the stud gun on it will work that well, because when you pull that stud gun up, it's gonna leave you a little hard tip on there. And on this side here, you can see, just like the other side, around this area, it's all low in this spots here. It's all low here. A couple of random dings that won't pull out with a stud gun, but may not fill with just one coat of filler on there. So here you can see this is all nice here. And when I lay down my filler coat, I don't have to have the same amount of filler coat on the entire thing. Right here, I know I've got a couple of dings and stuff. I can go a little thicker there. Here, this is looking really nice. I'll go thinner there. But you know, even though if you'd be tempted to not do this area at all, I'll generally do it anyway, because this could have high lows that you're not, that still aren't showing up now, even with doing this block sand. So we'll just go ahead and clean this off now. In all of my dinged areas here now, I'll go ahead and get 80 grit scratches on that, and I'll get all my 80 grit scratches lined up so that I can put filler on this too. So now I'm going to go ahead, this has been drying long enough, I'm going to fog this up and then I'm going to go ahead and sand this down. At first I'll just be working the large big chunky stuff off, and you can use a jitterbug or a grinder or whatever. Generally I only use 80 grit. You can use 36, but again, if you get 36 grit scratches in there, then you have to sand them out or they might fan them up on you later. So generally I'll just go 80 grit on this. If you're young enough and tough enough, I just start block sanding this, but generally that's a bit tough with all the ridges and stuff. So I'll kind of get it down a little bit, then we'll hit it with 80, then we'll go 150, then we'll go 220, so on and so forth. So I've knocked it down with the 80 grit grinder. Now I'm going to go with an 80 grit VA sander. I'll fog it up again, and then I'll go ahead and sand it down. Now when we're doing this, we want to make sure we don't sand it too far. We don't want to gouge into the Bondo or anything like that. We want to leave this nice and high so that when we block sand it, that's when we get to our final flat spot. So you saw how I laid that down, right? We start at one edge and we lay down a nice pattern. And then each successive layer that we lay down is going to be overlapping our original. Now, if we're laying it down fat, we'll do a large overlay. If we're doing a thin, then we can do less of an overlay. But if we get a nice pattern here and we just keep using that and overlaying on it, then we should get a pretty nice even layout all the way across the board. Here, I've sanded down with the jitterbug, but this is about as far as I'll take it. I'm not going to take out all of the defects here because we still need to just gently sand down with the 80 and the 150 and the 220. We want to leave this nice and high and shoot a fat coat of primer on here. And then after that block sand, that'll actually be our final block sand for this filler right here. But I'll show you what I mean later. We're done for the day and we'll see you all tomorrow. Bed's almost done.